Welcome to The Music Reel. It's an independent podcast that shares stories from every industry across the planet that music touches. We uncover how music connects all of us, and we shed light on those who need our support now more than ever. Welcome to The Music Reel. I'm your host, Nicola Burton. I'm thrilled to be speaking to my guest today. He is renowned playwright and the artistic director for the Sydney Festival, Wesley Enoch. It is a pleasure to meet you, Wesley.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Look, I have been, because obviously since March, our sector's been a little bit of flux, and we've been looking for cultural leadership, obviously, in this country. And I've been reading your articles over the last few months and thinking, he's saying it out loud. It was so refreshing to hear someone actually express how we're all feeling. So thank you for being our voice. We've really needed that. But I wanted to talk to you about the Sydney Festival. And look, I know you are crazy busy right now, so thank you for your time. But you said something really interesting. This is about kickstarting the Australian arts sector and about putting the money back into the pockets of the people who've really done it tough. So can you perhaps unpack that for me? Why is this festival so important post-COVID?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I mean, it's great. I'm here in Gadigal country, and my home country is up Quandamooka, Stradbroke Island in Jindabyne. So it's great to be part of this. And I say that also because it's that thing about leadership, that arts leaders, we are almost, as artistic directors, an unelected parliament, a cultural parliament. And therefore, we are representative of our sector as much as anything else in the public, but also in the policy making sense, and that we show our policies through action. So for me, we made a decision back in March that we should go all Australian. Two reasons. One is, yes, practical, yes, borders and all those kind of things, but also that we will need to inject our resources into our artistic economy as much as anything else. So we're putting in our almost $6 million worth of funds into the hands of artists, venues, and companies. And that it's interesting that we're not a smaller festival because we haven't got international works. In fact, we are larger than we've ever been. And the sense of going, because we're not spending money on freight and international airfares and inflated kind of international company fees, all of that money is going into our economy, and that's really, really important. And in fact, lots of festivals are now doing that, as you know, companies and venues are doing the same thing. And I think that we've needed different strategies for different parts of our sector. So we have 39 new commissions in our program, which is slightly less than last festival, surprisingly, but that's 39 new commissions, which are mostly in the kind of dance theatre area, because commissions are what's really important. We have over 50 gigs in small bars and clubs and for live music, because that's the best way to support live music, is to give gigs, because here are artists who have their material ready to go. So and visual artists, we've been working with galleries around to, not to make new work necessarily, but to help consolidate the audiences for the work that didn't get an audience during this period of time. We like to call them the stranded assets, the shows and artworks that kind of found themselves shipwrecked on the coastline of COVID, and going, how can the festival give them a new lease on life? And I'm very concerned that, yes, we can do the Sydney Festival in 2021, thank the Lord, thank you very much. But it's really about what's the long tail of COVID. And I'm particularly concerned about the next generation of artists, because we might go into, and I wrote this in the Saturday paper, we might go into now an age of conservatism, and where we want to minimize risk, and we look to precedent to develop our new works, to go, what has worked in the past, we should do that, rather than saying, let's risk something, a new direction, a new approach to things. And I worry that it's often the emerging or the younger artist who will miss out in that, because they don't have a well-known brand. They may need a little bit more trial and error or exploration of their form or their content, and that we'll find ourselves in a decision-making position as the unelected cultural parliament, where we go, oh no, let's just go with what we know rather than take the risks. And I've been railing against this in the last few months to say, let's not backslide to commissioning independent artists and individual companies. Let's not backslide away from our cultural diversity goals, our gender equity kind of aspirations. Let's not backslide away from First Nations representation. And so the Sydney Festival is a manifestation of those values, where we've just been pushing, going, okay, here it is, and take it or leave it. But that's what we're trying to do as our response to the COVID environment.
We need someone to tell our stories, Wesley, and you guys are doing this. Thank goodness. We're very, very lucky. And I wanted to say to you, I don't know what you thought, but in the recently handed down federal budget, arts was conspicuously missing. And, that concerns me, because why do you think we are an acceptable collateral damage for them?
Look, I think that arts, okay, I'm going to be self-critical rather than critical of others. I think that we are in a closed bubble of conversation often, and that as artists, we talk to other artists. Our job is to go talk to those who are not already in the tent. So how do we actually say to everyone in the country, look, every time you pick up a book, every time you listen to music on the radio, every time you listen to a podcast or you see a film or you watch television, all the stuff that you've done during COVID to keep you alive and vibrant is actually the arts. And that's the bigger discussion. And I think that governments find that they can not have a coherent arts policy, or they can do bits and pieces of things, or as you say, collateral damage perhaps, that's able to happen because somehow we've missed the communication with the public, and that somehow we've allowed this elite position of the artist to be the dominant discourse. We've said, oh no, we're the elite artists. But in fact, so many musicians are there at the coalface, working in bars and clubs and pubs, and really keeping that all alive. In terms of reading books, Australians are full on. More people go to museums and art galleries than go to football matches. There's all of this stuff, but we don't allow the conversation to be with everyday people. We somehow, as artists, want to say that we are distant and elite, and we push. Well, we could, but push the audiences away. And so I think that's why governments go the way they go, because we haven't actually articulated our connection enough. Now, that could also be because we're a distressed part of the sector too. The arts are distressed, and people in my position, the unelected cultural parliament, aren't stepping up and doing the job. Yeah. And I think artistic directors, by our very nature, we get paid the big bucks. We need to step up and actually represent these discussions and debates more and more.
But it's also all of us at every level having these discussions. And I'm glad that you sort of talked about how we connect to the audience, how we connect to the Australian people. Dr. Wendy Ware said it's a 19th century art form, a 20th century business model, and a 21st century audience need. It's perfect. It's the 21st century. We're all on our phones. So how do we future-proof and diversify, having that marriage between the arts and the technology, so that we can actually get our voices heard by the people, the end users?
Yes, I think that it's really about building communities. And if anything, this COVID period has taught us to think locally in a very radical way, that we cannot rely on the international or even the national kind of perspectives. And that I think that we should think of the digital technology as a gateway to a lived experience. Now, because I think it's dangerous to live only in the analog. I think it's dangerous to live only in the digital. But we need to, as artists, not poo-poo the digital, but go, how do I go through the digital into a lived experience as well? I mean, it's been interesting during the COVID period, people taking virtual tours of galleries, people having access to live performance in different parts of the country or the world. And that this digital technology shouldn't be scary to us. It should be something we embrace wholeheartedly.
Because we already live on our phones, so it's really just the next logical step, isn't it?
Well, but for me, it's interesting if we think of the phones and this digital technology in the way that the analog telephone or the telegraph or the printing press, these new technologies are wonderful delivery mechanisms, but they also change the culture. It's interesting that this figure's a little old, but that we have 5 forms of communication before we ever have a live experience. So, think about it. You're ringing your friends saying, I'm on my way, texting saying, oh, what time is we going there? And to arrange something takes 5 ways of connecting. And that's the same. We need to think the same way about the arts. Don't just assume because you put, you've paid for an ad on Facebook, like old people do, that people will turn up. You actually have to have an ongoing relationship and community with people. And if anything, my Aboriginal background says more and more, if you put culture into the center of a society and you build communities around this sense of storytelling and connection, they will be with you for the rest of your life. And that's what we need to do more of.
I love it. It's absolutely so true. You have this great quote where you say, artists are about finding the vocabulary for the future. I think that's never been so true as right now. Now, I recently read about the backlash that you experienced with Hugh Sheridan in the role of Hedwig. Now, I saw Hedwig in Broadway years ago with Neil Patrick Harris. Changed my life. And I thought, you guys handled that with such grace, such grace.
Oh, tough.
You really did, because so many people could just, but it was actually such a positive story, because diversity, inclusion, that's our way forward, right? So how grateful do you feel for that incredible feedback that you just got?
Oh, it was amazing. I'm going to have a meeting next week, actually, with some of the people who wrote that letter, because I think the biggest issue is about listening and learning, not about defensiveness, because regardless of whether you think they were right or they're wrong or all of that kind of stuff, that's actually immaterial. There's a group of people who feel like trans visibility, in this case, needs to have a light shone on it. And you go, yes, it does. I don't disagree with that. Now, should Hugh Sheridan play this role or not, or who owns the role or who made the role? All of that is actually immaterial to the point of going, what do we have to learn from this? And that what I worry about more than anything else, that in this digital world, what we end up doing is saying, actually, there's attack and defense. There's not actually listening and learning. And if anything, that artists, by our very nature, we live with discomfort. It is uncomfortable to put yourself out there in the public sphere all the time as either a performer or a writer or a musician or a recording artist. That there's a sense of that discomfort about being in the public domain is normal for us. So we don't have to defend or attack. What we need to do is go, okay, what do I have to learn from this? Actually, what's the opportunity to go forward? And large organizations feel that there's a political need to either attack or defend. And I think that what we have to do is change the culture. It's almost like the politics of our day, from Trump to Boris Johnson to even our federal government at the moment, and federal government for the last, let's say, 15 years or more, there's this idea of opposition and attack. And I think in the arts, we have to go, no, there's a new idea. There's something that's going on. How do we actually get behind it and get excited by it? And if there is a blind spot, which, there always is, you never have 360-degree vision of things, how do you listen to that voice and go, oh, that's a signal. That's a signal. How do I engage with that? And artistic leaders engage with the discomfort and understand it to build a new way forward.
Blind spots are all about the arts, isn't it? We find that blind spot and then we listen and we learn from it. So look, what a great vision you have for our future, Wesley. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. And I think anyone watching this is going to feel optimistic about how we work with arts to recover. Good luck with the Sydney Festival. Thank you for adding your voice today. It was so lovely talking to you.
Thanks, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.